Quantum AI just finished a task that was impossible for humans, and the warning it found is absolutely chilling.
Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of written record that we have.
This forbidden Sumerian tablet tells a story about a hidden decision made by the gods to erase human life. It has been missing for years in terms of the full message, but this new translation brings everything into the light.
They've been translated, and they tell exciting stories about how gods intermingled with human beings and actually had a hand in the creation of human beings.
What most people do not realize is that the tablet is a time bomb. It was found in the ruins of Nippur, but its message is for everyone alive today. Here is why the translation changes everything. Silent Stone speaks now. A small brown tablet sits in a glass case in Philadelphia, and most people walk past it without even slowing down. It looks like a rough rectangle of baked mud with edges that are broken, and a surface crowded with tiny wedge marks in neat rows. The label says it comes from the ancient city of Nippur in southern Iraq and belongs to the Babylonian section of the museum. What survives is only the lower part of a much larger piece written on both sides. The preserved section carries 6 slim columns of text, 3 on each face. Each column holds roughly between 10 and 15 lines, and scholars estimate that the complete tablet once held around 260 lines of writing. The clay is hard, the surface worn in patches with cracks cutting through some of the most crowded lines. It is small enough to rest in one hand, about 5 inches long, about 4 inches wide, and less than 1 inch thick. But every side is packed with wedges. This unimpressive lump carries one of the longest continuous Sumerian literary texts that has ever been found. For many decades, though, this tablet lay in storage trays and study rooms as just one more object from one more dig, while the warning that it holds sat quietly locked inside the wedges. To understand how that happened, everything has to roll back to Nippur itself. Nippur was never the political capital of Mesopotamia, but for the Sumerians, it was the holy city, home of the great temple complex called the Nippur, dedicated to the chief god, Enlil. In the late 19th century, the University of Pennsylvania sent what became the first American archaeological expedition to Mesopotamia. Teams of local workers and foreign archaeologists cut into huge mounds of sun-baked brick, trench by trench, under the heat of the southern Iraqi plains. Over roughly 12 years of off-and-on digging, they mapped the religious center with its temple and ziggurat, explored the business quarter, and opened up an area that became famous as the Scribal Quarter. That Scribal Quarter changed the way scholars see Nippur. In house after house, the teams uncovered stacks and scatterings of clay tablets. Some were simple business notes or contracts. Others held hymns, myths, royal praise poems, and complex school exercises. Reports from the excavations described thousands of clay tablets pulled from those rooms, still lying where ancient students and professional scribes had left them. Archaeologists later compared that area to a national library buried under its own ruins. Among the many crates of tablets that left Nippur for Philadelphia was one broken piece that would later be cataloged in the museum and recognized as the main witness to what is now called the Aridu Genesis. At the time it was packed and shipped. It was just another line on a shipping inventory. What the expedition had actually sent home was a clay tablet from the old Babylonian period written sometime around the 17th century before Christ. The language of the text is Sumerian, even though Sumerian had already stopped being a spoken everyday tongue by then. Scribes in that age treated Sumerian as a learned classical language, and they copied older religious and literary works as part of their advanced training. Later studies of schoolhouses at Nippur show that large literary tablets like this were usually written by higher-level students or specialists, not beginners learning their first signs. That already hints that the content of this particular tablet was considered serious and important in its own time. The way the text is written on the clay adds to the challenge. The script is made of small wedge-shaped impressions pressed into damp clay with the cut tip of a reed tool. Each sign is a pattern of wedges arranged at different angles. A single sign can stand for a whole word, for part of a word, or for an idea marker that guides how the reader should take other signs around it. Even in its mature form, the script uses hundreds of different signs, many with several possible values. Reading any long Sumerian text is slow work, and reading a damaged one forces you to make guesses all the way through. The physical state of this tablet makes those choices even harder. Big chunks are missing from the upper part and from one whole side. Cracks run down through columns of text, cutting signs in half. In some rows, the wedges are so shallow that they almost fade into the clay. This means the story cannot be rebuilt from this single object alone. Only by pairing it with overlapping pieces from other sites can scholars even try to fix the full sequence of lines. From the moment it arrived in Philadelphia, anyone who wanted to understand it had to treat it like a puzzle with missing pieces. Once the crate reached the museum, staff did exactly what they did with every other tablet. Workers cleaned the surface, fixed cracks, and gave the piece a number in the Babylonian section. Specialists made hand copies of the wedges on graph paper, stroke by stroke, and took black and white photographs. For some tablets, they also made plaster copies, pressing soft material against the surface to capture the shape of the signs. All of this data went into files and card catalogs that almost no member of the public ever saw. For the outside world, the tablet was just one more line in a printed list of objects with a place name and a few short words of description. It took a young expert to push this object out of that quiet corner and into the center of a much bigger talk. In the summer of 1912, the German scholar Arno Pobel spent several months at the museum copying tablets from the Nippur collection for a book of historical texts. He was not looking for myths in particular. He was hunting for anything that might show light on early Mesopotamian history and language. While working through the Nippur tablets, he came across this damaged piece and realized that its long, carefully built lines were not simple records. Pobel slowly copied the tablet sign by sign into regular letters. He then worked out a rough translation and shared the results. Other scholars soon saw that the story on this tablet did not stand alone. Separate pieces from the city of Ur and from the Royal Library of Nineveh kept overlapping sections of the same Sumerian text. In the 1980s, Thorkild Jacobsen pulled the material together and suggested calling the whole thing the Aridu Genesis, a name that has stuck ever since. From that point on, the tablet in Philadelphia was no longer just another Nippur object. It became the primary witness to a very old Sumerian story that stretches from the making of humans and the founding of early cities, all the way to a near-total crisis for the world those humans built. Only a small part of the original text survives on this one tablet, but its wording and layout anchor the whole rebuild. The pieces from Ur and Nineveh fill some of the gaps, and newer finds from the 21st century have added a few more lines, especially about the choice of the very first king. The big blocks to reading this text have always been the script, the language, and the damage. Over the past few decades, new tools have begun to break down those blocks. High-quality digital photos under slanted light can make very shallow wedges stand out as sharp shadows. Three-dimensional scanning projects now capture the full surface of tablets, allowing researchers to turn and look at the signs from any angle without ever touching the original. In some labs, special imaging shows faint traces of strokes that normal light cannot catch at all. Computer vision and intelligence projects are learning to spot individual wedge strokes in tablet photos and help figure out damaged or tightly packed signs. Work that once took weeks of slow manual tracing now moves much faster. The secret codes hidden in the mud were finally coming to light, but the machine was about to find something far more dangerous than anyone expected. Machine mind unlocks past. Now that we can read more of these marks, the question that follows is this: what story do they tell? And what warning did the ancient writer think was important enough to press into wet clay for future readers? The warning pressed into this clay tablet began to reveal itself as the computer analyzed the patterns. When the text on that clay tablet finally started to make sense, it did not happen all at once. Language experts first spread out copies of different pieces on their desks, one from Nippur, one from Ur, and a later piece from the Royal Library at Nineveh. That last piece gives the Sumerian lines side by side with an Akkadian translation, which is a related language from the same area. They treated these pieces like parts of one long song. Wherever the wording matched, they locked the lines together, and slowly a single story began to appear. The opening of the story is gone on the main tablet, but the missing lines can be drawn from what is left on the Ur piece and from notes in later texts. The Lost Beginning seems to have talked about how humans and animals first came into being, and how humans lived before there were real towns. In that stage, people moved around, stayed with their herds, and did not yet have steady homes, city walls, or temples. Life was restless, unsafe, and loosely organized, and the gods had to live with noisy, shaky human beings who were not yet doing proper work in fixed holy places. The first clear speech we have belongs to a goddess called Nippur, also known as a birth goddess who looks after humans. She complains that people move from place to place and that there is no lasting order. She wants humans to settle down, build cities, and raise temples where daily gifts can be made. Her speech is not just about comfort. It is about creating a world where the gods receive regular care and the people have leaders who answer for them. After this plan is set, the story moves into a list of the very first cities. It names Aridu as the first city and says it was placed under the care of the god Enki. Then it names Bad Tibira, Larak, Sipar, and Shurupak, each with its own ruler and god. These are not random towns thrown together. In the Sumerian way of thinking, this list is a sacred map. It shows where true kingship and proper worship first took root on earth, and it links each city to a specific guardian in the sky. The text then breaks again for several dozen lines, but other sources fill in some of the gap. It seems that kingship moves from city to city, rulers rise and fall, and human life becomes busier, louder, and more crowded. It is at this point, after cities and kings are in place, that the story shifts into its darkest turn. A group of high gods holds a meeting. The main tablet does not spell out every reason, but later flood stories from the same area talk about humans being too noisy, too many, and too hard to handle. The feeling is the same here. The decision is simple and mean. They will send a flood to wipe out almost everyone. A decision was reached in the divine meeting. A great flood would clean the earth, erasing the mistakes of humanity. This decision happens far above the human world. No one on earth is invited into the meeting. No king hears the talk. No city receives a warning from an official messenger. In the story, regular people keep living their lives in the low plain close to the rivers, with no idea that the leaders of the divine world have already signed their end. Only one god refuses to accept this. Enki, linked with fresh underground water and with clever plans, decides to bend the rules without openly breaking them. The human who matters most at this point is a man named Ziusudra. The text calls him king and priest of Shurupak, which is one of the cities already listed earlier. That double role is important. As king, he has the power to act. As priest, he is supposed to listen closely to the gods. In some lines, he is also called humble and good, which makes him the kind of person a god might trust with a secret that no one else is allowed to hear. Enki never walks up to Ziusudra and speaks face to face. Instead, he turns to a wall near where Ziusudra is sitting or lying down and speaks to the wall as if it could hear. In other words, he talks loudly enough in the right place that a human on the other side can pick up every line, while the god can still say he never told the man directly. This odd detail also shows up later in the Akkadian stories. In the flood tale in Atrahasis and in the flood speech in the 11th tablet of Gilgamesh, the god Ea, who is the Akkadian form of Enki, whispers his warning through the reeds of a house wall. The warning itself is simple and sharp. A great flood is coming that will sweep over the land and erase almost all human life. The decision is final. Ziusudra cannot stop it. His only choice is between silence and action. Enki tells him to build a huge boat big enough to hold himself, his family, and living creatures whose survival will matter for whatever comes next. The tablet does not keep the full plan. The lines that might have given the exact shape or size are gone. But it is very clear that the boat is not a small fishing craft. It is a large special boat built for one purpose, only to ride out what no normal house or town can survive. As the wood for the boat was gathered, the sky began to change into a color that no human had ever seen before. Great flood returns, soon. The story does not waste time on side scenes. Once the warning is given and the boat is built and loaded, the flood comes. Here the Nippur tablet becomes clear again. It speaks of a terrible storm that goes on for 7 days and 7 nights. All the evil winds and stormy winds are said to gather into one force. The flood sweeps over the cities and the big boat is tossed about on the great waters. Then the storm breaks. The text says that the sun god Utu appears, spreading light over the sky and the ground. At that moment, Ziusudra opens a window in the boat. For the first time in many days, fresh light and air pour in. As the rains began, Ziusudra's boat sheltered his family and animals. When the waters went down, Ziusudra was filled with thanks. He bows low before the sun and the other gods and prepares a huge gift. When the boat comes to rest and it is safe to step down, he prepares oxen and sheep and offers them as a gift. In the closing part of the story, the focus shifts to a small group of high gods again. Ziusudra appears in front of An, the sky god, and Enlil, who is shown as a powerful lord. The text says they give him forever life for keeping both the animals and the seeds of mankind safe. In a few later lines from a related text, the reward is described with a bit more color. Ziusudra is said to be settled in the distant land of Dilmun, the bright place where the sun rises. That means the story does not end with him stepping back into normal life. It ends with him being moved to a far pure land and given a kind of lasting life that ordinary people do not get. Other Sumerian tablets that talk about cities and ruins and kings under a curse fit into this pattern in their own way. They do not always bring water. Sometimes the trouble comes as war, hunger, or foreign invasion. But after seeing how this tablet treats the whole human world as something that can be switched off by a single hidden decision, those other tales start to sound less like simple stories and more like different faces of the same deep fear. Other warnings on clay show a city in ruins and a king under a curse. Sumerian writers left long poems about cities smashed to the ground and a famous king whose pride helped destroy his own capital. Two of the strongest examples are the sad song over the destruction of the city of Ur and a story called The Curse of Agade, which tries to explain why the city fell so hard. The path to the sad song over Ur starts the same way as many Mesopotamian stories do, with stray tablets in different places. Early pieces turned up in the temple library at Nippur and went into the collection of the University of Pennsylvania. George Barton shared a first set of lines in the early 1900s and thought he was looking at a prayer for Ur. Later, more copies came out of the ground at Ur itself, and from museum shelves in cities like London, Istanbul, and Berlin. Only when experts put more than 20 pieces side by side did a long, steady text start to appear. In its full form, it runs to a little over 430 lines, grouped into 11 sections that repeat certain words and images like a song. One of the best-kept copies sits today in the Louvre in Paris. The museum notes that the tablet carries a sad song in 11 parts about the ruin of Ur written in Sumerian. The piece itself is not huge. It is a hand-sized tablet with rounded edges and tight columns of wedge signs on both sides. It looks like a tired brown brick, but every line is loaded with sadness. What makes this song so strong is the voice it uses. The speaker for most of the poem is Ningal, the goddess of Ur and the wife of the moon god Nana. Nana was the son of Enlil, a major god, father of the sun god Utu, and the goddess of love and war, Ishtar. She talks as if she is standing inside her own city while it is being judged. She begs the highest gods, An and Enlil, not to let the disaster fall. She reminds them of the gifts, the songs, and the loyalty that Ur has shown. The poem then makes it very clear that her cries were ignored. The great storm still comes. When she speaks again, she is not asking for mercy. She is walking through ruins and crying over what has already been lost. The pictures the poem uses are simple enough that anyone can feel them. Temples that once held statues of the gods are smashed and empty. Streets that were once packed with traders and carts are cold and silent. Houses stand open with no one inside. Fields that once gave grain are now dry and cracked with no workers and no harvest. The people of Ur are gone, taken as prisoners or running as refugees. In the background sits a real event, the fall of the third dynasty of Ur, when foreign forces and local rivals brought down the royal house and power moved to other cities in the south. The sad song treats that shift as the end of a whole world. This poem did not stay locked in one moment. Copies of the sad song for Ur show up on tablets from the early 2nd millennium before Christ, far from the time when Ur actually fell. Scholars who study school tablets have shown that advanced students in writing schools copied this text as a kind of final test. You did not get this poem on your first day of training. You got it when you were trusted with long, hard material. That means young writers in many cities sat and scratched out the tears of a goddess over and over, long after the smoke over Ur had cleared. Every copy turned the fall of one city into a warning lesson for other cities. If the link between your god, your king, and your people breaks, even a proud capital can become a ghost town. Modern writers have noticed how close this sounds to other famous sad songs from history. Both sets of texts mourn a real city that has been destroyed. Both speak in the voice of someone close to the city walking through broken streets and asking why this happened. There is no direct copy line that we can prove, but many scholars now see the Sumerian city songs, including the one for Ur, as the earliest clear examples of this way of thinking. But even a goddess's tears could not stop the curse that was already moving toward the next great empire. Screams through dead streets. The curse of Agade shows what happens when a human leader helps push his own city over the edge. Agade, also called Akkad, was the capital of the Akkadian Empire, and Naram Sin was one of its strongest kings. Naram Sin was already a great warrior by the time he took the throne. The story we call the Curse of Agade was written hundreds of years after his life, probably under the later kings of Ur, and survives in many school copies from the early 2nd millennium before Christ. Experts used those small tablets to rebuild the full tale line by line. The story starts with the city at its peak. The city is full of goods. Trade routes are busy. The gods seem happy and people believe the future is safe. Then something changes. The high god Enlil takes away his favor. Signs and messages fall silent. There are no clear words from the divine world. Naram Sin waits, then grows more and more angry at this long silence. In the poem, his anger turns into a terrible choice. Instead of waiting, he marches on Nippur, the religious center of Sumer, and attacks the Ikur, which is Enlil's own temple. The text shows him tearing down sacred walls and carrying off treasures that were never meant to leave that holy place. That one act becomes the turning point. Enlil and the other great gods answer not with a storm, but with a curse spoken over the whole city of Agade. They call down the Gutians, mountain people from the east, and turn them into a living weapon. Later copies of the poem describe the Gutians as people who do not talk like normal folk, who move like packs of animals, and who sweep across the fields like a hunting net. Under their raids, normal life breaks apart. Trade boats stop moving on the rivers. Messengers no longer travel the roads. Prisoners and bandits stand where guards and officials once stood. The curse reaches even into the food supply. One famous part says that prices climb so high that a single lamb can buy only half a small measure of grain or half a measure of oil. Fields that once gave rich harvests now yield nothing. Canals turn to bitter water. Places that once held good plants now grow only weeds. Houses where people once slept in safety become so bad that anyone who wants to live there finds no good place. The city that was once the center of an empire becomes a place people avoid. Readers in later centuries may have used this story as a way to talk about limits on power without naming their own rulers. Agade and Naram Sin became a safe way to give a real warning. If a king treats the holy center of the country like just another target, everyone pays the price. This history of falling cities leaves us with a question that feels more like a cold shadow than a simple mystery. Pride destroys every world. The thing is, when you look at all these tablets together, a pattern starts to appear that is hard to ignore. From the flood that wiped out the first cities to the sad songs of Ur and the curse of Agade, the message is always about a sudden reset. These were not just stories for children, they were the primary records of a culture that lived in constant fear of a hidden decision from above. The quantum AI translation of the Forbidden Tablet reinforces this by highlighting specific dates and cycles that seem to repeat. What if these warnings are not just about the past? What if the ancient scribes were trying to tell us that our own world has a shelf life? We see cities today that think they are too big to fall, just like Ur and Agade once did. We have technology that feels like magic, but so did the people who built the ziggurats. The warning on the clay is simple. Nothing lasts forever when the balance is lost. The AI found that the tablet mentions a time when the stars align and the noise becomes too much. In our world of constant noise and global connection, that detail feels uncomfortably close to home. Are we missing a key detail that could save us? Or is the decision already made? The ancient Sumerians believed that once the gods reached a verdict, there was no way to change it. They just had to build their boats and hope for the best. As we look at these broken pieces of mud, we have to wonder if we are the next ones whose story will be pieced together by a machine in 1,000 years. The chilling part is that the tablet ends with a blank space, as if the writer ran out of time or clay. It leaves us standing in the ruins of the past, looking at a future that looks more like a mirror than a mystery. This is the deal. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. And the rhyme on this Sumerian tablet is a scream that has been traveling through time for 5,000 years. We might be the ones who finally have to answer it. Could our modern world be facing the same sudden reset the Sumerians warned about? Is our technology enough to save us from a silent decision? Like and subscribe for more mysteries.